It's a moonlit night in Brighton and we're out here hunting beasts. This is the Shadow Trap. I'm Rosie, my companion as ever is Bob.
Hello.
We're from Team Diane, and here on this show we're building a space, step by step, where all the spooks and creatures of the night that we know and loathe, from film, folklore, myth, music, dreams and drama, can all be held safe and happy. Our mission is to... Oh, here we go. This is the bit that I didn't write down. Our mission is to classify, characterise and capture... I've got it. Our mission is to classify, characterise and capture various different supernatural creatures, but in each case we only have one film to work from. Last time we stuffed some semi-delusional ghosts into the old ecto-containment chamber, and tonight we're chucking fresh red meat in after them in the hope of enticing some werewolves. We're taking our cues and our clues from one of the greatest monster movies of the 1980s. It's John Landis's superlative transatlantic 1981 creature feature, An American Werewolf in London. Tonight it's kill or cure, dear listener. Welcome to the Shadow Trap.
So this is going to be the first question that I think we have to ask every time, but so Rosie, do you believe in werewolves?
Do I believe in werewolves?
It's a tricky one, isn't it?
It's, I mean, no, is the answer.
Like, because werewolves, and this is kind of one of the things I'm sure we're going to talk about, werewolves are so much more solid than what we were talking about last time, which is ghosts, which are kind of a much more numinous, difficult thing to pin down. But actually, the question, do you believe in werewolves, is a bit more complicated and difficult to answer, because there are these kind of, like, the idea of a werewolf that we have in folk culture comes from somewhere.
Right.
So all the other things that people thought a werewolf was a decent narrative explanation for, lots of those things maybe are real. So if you're talking about people with porphyria's complaint or something, who exhibit sensitivity to the sunlight, maybe have strange behaviours because of that, maybe grow hair in abnormal places. Lots of the details of that, they might emerge on well-lit dark nights. A lot of these kind of things would lead you to kind of come up with something like a werewolf. That's not a bad, that's an understandable, fair story to turn into that. No,
it's not a bad working hypothesis. The other one that people often say is that it was an explanation of serial killers, of people who carried out those kinds of acts before there was a psychological framework within which to fit them. Which kind of makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Or, another good one is Vikings, and there were like a special elite corps of super tough, scary Vikings who would drink their potions and undergo kind of like psychic transformations, and then, hey, why not wear a wolf skin and go rampaging around your northern monasteries and whatnot, grabbing slaves. And they were called berserkers, and then they kind of fit into folklore as being what a werewolf would be as well, a man that acts like a beast. All of these things, they're real, and a werewolf seems like a real thing to use to talk about them. However, as you say, we are basically talking about a bloke who turns into a monster when the full moon comes out. Yeah. And so we're going to go in no.
We have to kind of go. I mean, I think maybe we also don't have a personal connection with them in the way that we do maybe with ghosts.
Yes, you're not expected to have maybe seen one ever.
No, that's absolutely not the thing. And I also feel like werewolves, I mean, for me, I don't feel like I have any kind of strong personal... This is the first time I've seen a werewolf movie, I think.
Okay, man.
Maybe ever.
Right.
I feel like werewolves are really 80s and I missed them.
Because you said that in your notes, and I was like, really? No, this is a venerable, ancient, like deeply ingrained archetype kind of thing. And then I reflected, oh no, hang on. And if you've gone to, if you go to mindlessones.com, one of our kind of a family of website buddies, Dan White, my buddy, the cartoonist, a friend of the show, recently put on a nice appreciation of American Werewolf in London, where he mentions that pretty much all of the best werewolf films, which includes this one, a film called The Howling, and a film called Wolfen, which is fantastic.
Right.
They all appear within, they're all 80s movies.
Yeah, and like Teen Wolf as well.
Teen Wolf, yeah. I think you're right. I think they are kind of an 80s thing. I wonder if that's to do with the way that like kind of urban centres in America kind of decayed somewhat in the late 70s, and then that became a kind of an acknowledged social problem in the early 80s and kicked off gentrification and all those kind of things. And I wonder if it's like, it's the urban jungle. It's maybe one of the first times that the modern urban space was representative of something as scary as the woods at night.
That makes sense.
That's what we're going to go with for the 80s.
Yeah. I do think as well, actually, I should point out that although I feel like they're 80s and I feel like there isn't much recent personal connection, for a whole bunch of women, the werewolf remains very significant and present because he's a big part in Twilight and all sorts of related smut that is published on Amazon. If you want to check it out, there's loads of it.
Let's go then.
So yeah, lots of ladies are currently also still into werewolves, and good for them.
And we have, you know, to bring it bang up to date and make it very internet, furries?
Furries!
People who kind of don, on special occasions, they don wolf outfits, let's be honest.
Very often wolf outfits,
Quite often.
yeah.
And live out their desires that they're not allowed to live out for the rest of the month.
Yeah, I mean they're rather more playful desires.
We are pro-furry here on the Shallow Trap. We are not going to be looking to poke you into the Shallow Trap at any time soon.
Absolutely not.
Keep doing what you're doing, guys, loving it. Okay, let's talk about the film. It's American Werewolf in London, directed by John Landis, 1981, starring David Norton as David, our main hero, and Jenny Agutter, the lovely Jenny Agutter.
My goodness. I don't think I've seen Jenny Agutter in anything else. Maybe was she in The Railway Children?
She's the one with the knickers in The Railway Children.
Well, good for her.
Yeah.
The only way I know Jenny Agutter is the fact that my dad has a huge crush on Jenny Agutter.
Right.
I can see why now. She's lovely.
She is one of those actors who totally had a certain type of role at a certain time, where if you were in the audience at a certain time in your life, Jenny Agutter would mean a heck of a lot to you.
Right, yeah, she's very twinkly.
Yeah. Sticks in the mind. And also kind of in terms of who's in this film, we must mention Rick Baker, who did the special effects. The gore effects, the werewolf transformation effects in this film are like a huge part of its personality and really kind of like important to the way that it feels. And we start so the film opens up in, you know, kind of the most unbelievably cliched, it's a horror film way. Two strange guys way out of their depth on a really weirdly chosen holiday to the Yorkshire Moor.
Yes, yeah, they've gone to see the north of England's landscape. Fair enough, it's very beautiful.
It is very beautiful, but there's also nothing to do there. And, you know, guys, 2 words, Ayanapa. Next time, if you're looking for a fun European holiday, then, you know, your first stop doesn't necessarily need to be the Dales or whatever.
Yeah.
They're going for a walk. It's getting dark. You know, the sun's going down. This whole opening sequence, as much as it's really enjoying staging its clichédness, and the way that they bring the sunlight down and the transition from dusk to nighttime, that's really handled subtly and really nicely in the scene. Just as like things are getting dark, they turn up at this pub called the Slaughtered Lamb.
Yeah, bodes well.
Yeah, it's not a good omen, guys. You know, it's great. One of the things that's really cool about this is that something which certainly all British people have done. You walk into the wrong pub.
Yeah.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
And it gets that across as well. You don't have to be an American tourist in order to feel that wave of hostility when you walk into the wrong pub. That comes across really nicely. They warned in this really kind of like, again, hackneyed way about, don't mind the moon, lads. They ask some questions about this blatantly weird pagan thing that they've got on the wall, which is obviously there to ward off the werewolves that they're worried about. And they kind of really take offence at a fairly innocuous question and are unceremoniously kicked out of the pub.
Kicked out, right out of the pub, just kind of stumbling out on the moors, on their own.
It's hilarious. They're told many times not to leave the road, and they're just like, next thing you know, they're on the road, and then they're not.
They just amble on off it.
And this gets, the moon is full, they've been told about that. There's a really nice sequence that happens next of them being tracked and stalked, kind of from the perspective of the wolf, but kind of not, just kind of the perspective of the moor. Their banter, like there's a real love of like kind of like wisecracking energy in this film, and the way that it brushes up against British kind of values is really nicely played with. But the way that their banter dries up and their one-liners flowing between them suddenly become much more desperate and much less funny. And then boom, something comes at them. It's a massive wolf. Jack is killed. David is wounded. The villagers, having had a weird, kind of a bit too late change of heart, come along. They shoot the wolf, but David is seriously injured and passes out.
Yeah, absolutely. He wakes up in hospital.
3 weeks later, his family don't seem to have been too worried about it in the meantime. They have just let him sit there. The guy from the American consulate comes up, and when faced with the fact that this guy's maybe a bit discombobulated after being asleep for 3 weeks and having lost his best friend, just kind of freaks out and goes, well, stuff you then, I'm not going to help you get home.
Yeah, I mean, we should say the guy from the American consulate is played by Frank Oz, who is a real hero of mine.
I did not know that. I saw his name was in the credits and I thought, oh, right.
Very famously played Miss Piggy, so one of my favourite representations of women on screen, and also directed House Sitter, which is my favourite film.
Oh, is it?
So it's very nice to see Frank Oz there.
Yeah. I mean, he's of course Yoda. He's
Oh, is he?
Yeah, he's the ultimate alien.
Oh my goodness, he's had a really good career.
Oh, he's a legend. Yeah, he's absolutely fantastic. So he wakes up in a hospital in London, and all of a sudden, things happen fairly quickly. And this is one of the great things about this film. It's so brisk. It doesn't outstay its welcome at all. It really hits you with its horror, hits you with its humour, and then as soon as it's kind of done what you think it wanted to do, as soon as it's spent all of its budget, just gets the hell out and
it's done.
just left. Yeah.
Yep.
Which is so refreshing when you're watching it. You're like, oh great, I thought I was going to have a boring third act to worry about here, but it really didn't happen. He starts to have these bizarre visions, and kind of this is the where the film steps outside of the kind of the cliches really, and starts to use some really quite inventive shocks, some really good trippy bad dream sequences that all have a really nasty kind of violence lurking in them. So he's walking through a woods, which is weird, right? Because we know that this wolf doesn't come from a woods; it comes from the moor, which is all pretty bare. He sees things like his family being killed in this horrible vision of like Nazi wolf soldiers. We'll get back to that in a bit maybe, because the Nazi werewolf thing is quite interesting. And you really get this sense that he's the cornerstones of his identity, his best friend, his family, his kind of sense of himself as an urban American human, all being munched. They're all being cleared out of the way. And then but while this is going on, he's having this wonderful flirtation with nurse Jenny Agutter.
Nurse Price.
Nurse Price.
Yeah.
She's very sweet and understanding, and the relationship between them is kind of inappropriate, like it is in a lot of 80s movies.
Massively inappropriate.
And you just kind of go, you have to just trust, it's like Sigourney Weaver and Bill Murray in Ghostbusters, you just have to kind of trust the chemistry of the actors to make this not really creepy and inappropriate, and luckily that sparkle between them is there.
Very much so.
Yeah, they vibe off each other really, really nicely. But then Jack appears, and there's this really interesting, like, intellectual level is kind of put back into his werewolf transformation. We know that he's a werewolf, that's kind of obvious. The film it's not who done it or who is it or anything like that. We're being told this is the story of an American werewolf in London, and so we're very much in the seat with that from the beginning. So we know what's happening, but then Jack appears and he's dead, and he's still got all of the scars that he had fresh from the attack. And he kind of reveals that his spirit is trapped in this limbo realm that happens to people who are killed by werewolves, which gives them an extra level of threat beyond mere physical death.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? The werewolf doesn't just tear people apart, it traps its soul.
Yeah, in limbo, you can't move on. It's really, for a Jewish guy, it's a really Christian place that he's kind of been sent to in the afterlife. And then he has to, yes, that's right, so the werewolf has to be killed, the werewolf has to die before his spirit can move on to wherever it has to go to next. And so David understands in no uncertain terms that he is a werewolf. These dreams that he's been having do mean something, and the only moral thing for him to do now is to seek his own extinction, because he's not just a dead man walking. He's an evil thing walking. He's a destructive force.
Yeah, and then the rest of the film is him struggling against impulse until going to his unavoidable end.
Yeah. Like a wonderful apotheosis of him wreaking total havoc in Piccadilly Circus, which is great.
Absolutely fantastic. Okay, so on to the research method. As I say, we have drawn up a loose methodology for contact with various supernatural beings. We are hoping to refine it as we go on, but our first question for now is, what do we seek? And as we've said, it's werewolves.
Yeah, it's werewolves, but it's the wolfman. It's the thing that it transforms bodily into a wolf thing, and retains kind of a human guilt in its eyes, but also not. The point at which it kind of loses its human responsibility is one of the really interesting questions about it, because obviously being a werewolf for a few nights every month would be rad, because you could turn into a werewolf and have all these ace adventures, but the kind of the human that you have to go back to being isn't going to enjoy that fallout of it.
No, is torn up psychologically by what he has done.
And also, for the purposes of the Shadow Trap, we need to talk about the kind of things that a werewolf isn't. And there's a really big one, isn't there?
Yeah. Big shout out to Danny Davies, who we had some chat with on Twitter this week.
Danny!
Who suggested Company of Wolves for a film that deals with the kind of supernatural dimensions of the wolf character. And I think there's a lot of crossover with the wolf character we see in Company of Wolves, which is loosely based off Red Riding Hood, which is the big bad wolf.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about the big bad wolf this week.
No, although I haven't quite worked out how yet, he's different.
My feeling is that the big bad wolf, when we're talking about the big bad wolf, the person who needs to be concerned is a woman. When we're talking about werewolves, the person who needs to be concerned is a man.
Boom.
I think that's what it is.
Yeah, nice one.
I think the werewolf story strikes to a concern of men.
Yeah, that's
and the big bad
right.
wolf attacks women.
Right, okay, cool. That's good, because I haven't made many notes about periods and stuff, but we can do that when we get to the Company of Wolves, because that's what a show that we're definitely going to do.
We can. I mean, it's actually really interesting, isn't it? Because that's the other thing we have to talk about with werewolves, is the moon is an unescapable presence. And the idea of a monthly cycle that transforms one's mood is actually like something that I'm sure we're all familiar with when we talk about women and menstruation. But the werewolf is a very male phenomenon. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. I hadn't really put my finger on that, but it is about, it's kind of about like the expectations of the Enlightenment man to not be doing the things that an unenlightened man would be doing all the time anyway, isn't it? And it's like, it's very gendered and very much kind of to do with patriarchal roles and kind of the responsibility of the breadwinner and the responsibility of the father and all this kind of male bollocks.
Yeah, I mean, it's extremely gendered, and actually with the witch trials that took place in the 1500s, 1600s into the 1700s in Europe, often a component on the continent, not so much in the UK, was werewolf trials taking alongside. So whereas women would be tried as witches, sometimes there were men being tried, and they were often considered to be werewolves.
Right.
And that they had done a kind of pact with the devil.
That's more of a European thing, isn't it? And I think that's kind of probably just connected to the fact that wolves survived a lot later there than they did over here on our lovely little island, where we killed off all of the scary animals much earlier. Much earlier.
Yeah. Although apparently they're talking about reintroducing the wolf, and I'm quite into the idea.
Oh, those things are very good ideas. There's a wonderful George Monbiot, of all people, documentary about the kind of the complex effect of the reintroduction of an alpha predator into certain environments, and it's not really just the things that, it's not like they don't keep the population of deer down, because that's a huge problem everywhere. If you take away all the predators, the deer just eat all the trees. Yeah. And that's really damaging for like everywhere. It's not the fact that if you introduce a predator that they kill a shitload of deer, because they don't need that many deer to eat, but the deer change their behaviour and they start to avoid open lands, places where they can be hunted easily, and this has, this allows plants to regrow. It has huge knock-on effects to the ecosystem, and just actually bringing this scary creature back into the to the place where it belongs is enormously beneficial to biodiversity, kind of land erosion. Just like it's a good thing.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's quite good to know.
It's good to know, and it fits with what we're talking about, because the reason that a werewolf is a problem is because it's out of place. You know, it's like it's an American werewolf in London. It's not just an American werewolf on the moor, where actually, as we see, the local community has established a set of rules and conventions and have a story around it with which they can explain it to each other and keep each other safe from it. When it gets to the city and it's out of that place where it belongs, trouble starts. Big trouble.
Great. I've just realised. Turn the light up.
Oh, okay.
Sorry to everyone watching on the video. I just realised one of our lights was missing.
Can you see us now?
Hello!
Hi! Okay, our next question for the Shadow Trap. Where should we go?
We've kind of touched on it. We need to go to the moors.
Yeah, we do need to go to the moors. This is the second time that we've kind of mentioned Wuthering Heights as well, because that's almost this really kind of nice suggestion about Jack and David. The reason that they've gone to the moor in the first place is because they both have this kind of quite charming, sort of sneaky love of 18th century literature. Like, and they've kind of gone to live out their Heathcliff fantasies and meet Cathy on the moor. It's really nice.
Yeah, it feels like the moors in American Werewolf in London are probably around Yorkshire from the accent.
Yeah.
But there's certainly a space within the British imagination, which is the moors.
Yeah.
Which has been inhabited by many writers. As you say, Wuthering Heights is a famous example. Another one is the fantastic poem The Highwayman by Alfred Noyes, which is set on the moors. And yeah, it's a really interesting landscape.
It's kind of what we have instead of forests almost, isn't it? It's kind of its bareness is more challenging than the fact that you can't see through the trees.
Yeah, I mean, well, to continue your ecological chat, Bob, actually I looked up some stuff about moors, because I'm always really interested in kind of particular soils and particular areas and how areas kind of work in terms of their fauna. Moors are acidic land where you have low-lying vegetation. That's what a moor is. And interestingly enough, there are moors all over the world, but 10 to 15% of all the world's moors are in the UK. Which, considering we're such a small island...
There'll always be an England. Really fills your heart with pride, doesn't it?
I like that. So
Not many things to boast about, but we can claim the moors.
We've got a lot of moors here, and that's really good to know. They are lovely. And they do have a connection with the idea of beasts.
Yes. So, like, some of the most famous moors in the UK have... it's not a good moor unless it's got a mystery beast that lives there, is it?
Absolutely. Yeah, so you've got in Cornwall, you have Bodmin Moor, associated with a big cat, the Beast of Bodmin Moor.
Yeah.
And I believe Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes, Hound of the Baskervilles is set around Dartmoor.
Dartmoor, yeah, and Dartmoor again. This is me giving away some of my non-rational prejudices, but like there are big cats living on these moors in Britain. Like a bit like the way that I think I believe in ghosts is just because I don't think people are that stupid and lie that much.
Yeah.
I think if that many people say no, I've seen a massive big cat on the moors, there probably are massive big cats on the moors.
Yeah.
Like that's just where I'm going with it.
Right. I mean, yeah, they're associated with obviously the great beast himself, the devil. Often rides out across moors looking for unbaptised babies.
Yeah, right.
I always thought that was super fun. It was like, why are there unbaptised babies just hanging out on the moor at midnight?
Well, that's quite interesting, right, isn't it? It's like, if you had to get rid of a baby, if you didn't want it, then you'd just go and leave it on the moor, I guess.
Oh,
maybe
that's
something
probably
like that.
actually true.
Yeah.
I remember going to Bodmin Moor as a kid with my mum and the fantastic people at the Witch Museum in Boscastle. Terrifying museum.
Excellent place.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. There was a story of the Beast of Bodmin Moor going out looking for unbaptised babies, and I remember like really hassling my mum about whether or not I was baptised, And she was just like, I don't think you need to worry about it, Lucy.
You're not a baby anymore.
Yeah, and it was just like, yeah, but could you just let me know?
Yeah.
Just so I know I can tick it off my list of concerns.
And frankly, ma'am, I'm not stupid. You're saying that I'm not, aren't you?
Apparently I am, but she didn't tell me for ages because she just didn't think I should be scared.
Oh, right, yeah, okay. She should have just told you. That would have been an easy way of stopping you from being scared.
Well, as soon as she told me, I was fine. You know.
So it's the more, but like I said, for the werewolf to become a problem, you need him out of the moor. And there's something really interesting about the way that Jack and David are going to the old country. Like they're these very modern, very sort of wise East Coast kind of American Jewish intellectual guys, basically. And they're on the moor because, as we've established, they like girls' books, and they've come to have their terrible problem, and then it goes to the city, and that's where things start to rub up against it, where, you know, the pressures of life are so kind of heightened anyway that the strictures that we place upon ourselves voluntarily really do need to be adhered to. Otherwise, you literally are going to get pushed into the road and killed. There's a lot of danger in the city that you need to keep your composure for. And once that begins to be chipped away by the werewolf, yeah, all hell can break loose, and it becomes more of a risk to... This is the thing, isn't it? It's like, it's not just a risk to people, it's a risk to society. It's like, it's a civilizational risk having a werewolf loose. Absolutely.
Yeah. And actually, there's an element of a foreign perspective on London that you see there, which is really well done. It's certainly a kind of stereotype of the British, that there are lots of unspoken rules, that we are guessers rather than askers, that people kind of know the way that things are done, and it can be quite difficult to come into not understanding all the sort of protocols. And David certainly kind of embodies that, much more so once he's in wolf form, obviously.
Yeah, but there is. I'm glad you spotted that too, because I'm like, I know this is the thing. They're stepping out of their comfort zones, but kind of backwards as well. There's almost like, you know, they're young men. They're going on a bit of a journey of self-discovery. They discover a lot more about themselves than they really wanted to, I'm sure. But that seems to come with this massive amount of risk for them. Like, this kind of fascination with the way things were, or is there stuff back in our unconscious depths which can be carefully sifted and used productively now? No.
No.
No, you're in trouble, guys.
Okay. So, where do they come from? By this we mean, how is the werewolf born?
He's born from the moon.
It's the moon, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't come out unless it's the moon. I find this really interesting. We see this, as I say, it kind of links up with very feminine ideas that we have about menstruation. Won't bang on about that, maybe when we get to Red Riding Hood. But another text that deals with wolves and the moon, I should say, is Bloodborne, which is a video game that came out in the last few years.
Right.
It's kind of a werewolf text,
right.
I would say. It's coming at it from quite a different angle, but certainly it's got the moon and it's got beast transformations. And the idea of it being something that is born as a kind of infection in the blood as well.
Yeah, it's got this weird... So the moon is like a very well understood metaphor in lots of cultures for the unconscious, for the imagination, whereas the sun represents all of the things that we use to build our lives, our material lives out of. The sun represents all the stuff that we build our inner lives out of when we're dreaming or when we're sharing stories.
The moon is.
Yeah, the moon is, yeah.
Yeah. That's its signification in the tarot.
Yeah, indeed, yeah. The moon tarot card, as it's kind of traditionally drawn, is a really interesting marker here, because actually it's one of the few tarot trumps that has no human figures on it, and it's not really about... Once you're into that moonlit land, most of the things that make you human kind of don't apply. You can take them with you, but you can't expect their rules to kind of be solid still anymore.
That's true, isn't it? So on the classic tarot Mooner, the Pamela Coleman Smith deck, the Rider-Waite, the moon has dogs howling at it, doesn't it?
Yeah, indeed. And the moon creates this channel which goes into something worse. Okay, this was fascinating bit of like Diane style, you know, over connecting. But David's surname is Kessler.
Okay.
So yeah, Wikipedia the hell out of that. Kessler is a German surname. Obviously, these guys are German Jews, kind of by heritage. It's a German word for a kettle or a copper kettle. But another word that it's got, like its secondary meaning, is of a basin, which obviously connects to a kettle, but specifically the basin of a valley.
Okay.
Right, and in the Rider-Waite Tarot, the bottom of the card that's joined with this kind of shaft of moonlight is a basin of a valley, which is filled with this water, and crawling out of the water is this kind of lobster thing. And it's a bit like, it's not a lobster, it's Cthulhu. It's much more kind of deep unconscious than this.
I did not know this.
Yeah.
This is very interesting for anyone who's into Bloodborne, by the way, but I won't get into it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There maybe is an appendix that we can explore there. Okay,
maybe.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. And I got this sense that the werewolf is kind of in the way that, and it's the way we get to the transformation a bit later, but the way that like it's such a bodily change, it's almost hiding something else. You know, all the hair, all of the way that like you're kind of the first, once you lose your animal nature, once you lose your human nature and the animal nature takes over, it's a dog. It's like it's the most familiar animal, you know?
Well, this is the interesting thing with dogs, right? Dogs are a cross between men and wolves.
Yeah. And that's almost like, no, there's something behind the the werewolf, which is much more opaque, much more kind of shapeless, and much more kind of about what the individual is and about the kind of the things of unconscious behaviour that the individual is made out of, and where that goes wrong. What happens when you're in the dream or you're in the meditative space and these things pop out at you which don't fit into the world of flesh. And that's what the werewolf is trying to be. He's things which aren't fleshly, given flesh.
That's really cool. That's really cool. So, like, if you shaved a werewolf, there would be a very strange form underneath.
Yeah, or just wriggling tentacles and like, yeah, it's not just, you know, it's something weirder coming out. One of the things that, like I said, like becoming a werewolf every month, that's cool, right? That's a good time. But one of the things that we're frightened of is that it kind of, the werewolf like feeds on our higher human qualities. It really wants to feast on those. That's its favourite. Like, obviously, you're tempted to kind of talk about the werewolf being from the id or something, and it has these very sort of like plain fleshly desires. But I got a sense in the way that we see these different parts of David's personality being, you know, taken out even in the dream space first of all, and then kind of more physically when he starts to change. We see a lot of the things that make him human being eaten or being destroyed violently. His family, his kind of his heritage. You know, there's Uzis being sprayed all over the house. You know, his kind of like the psychic trauma of the Holocaust, with the way that the werewolf coming again from this Viking mythology was, you know, consciously aped by the Nazis, and the stormtroopers would use wolf-like kind of stuff to make themselves seem extra scary. So that has an extra charge with a Jewish man, obviously.
I did not know that, right?
But the really cool thing is what they want, which maybe brings us to our next question.
Great.
So what do they want? I think what they really want is, they want love, and I don't mean that in the sense that they want to be loved.
Yeah.
I think that they want to eat love. There's something about the way that the relationship between Nurse Price and David is the thing that seems to kind of bring the wolf into being, right? It's like, if they weren't having this relationship, there would be no tragedy here. There would be nothing that would be at stake that we would be really worried about losing. But actually, there's something really at risk here, and it's something that the werewolf seems to be really wanting.
That's really interesting. So like the idea that it is something from within that attracts the bees. That what they want is something that's very part of you, something that's very internal.
Kind of like, so yeah, very part of you, very internal, but also like the best things that you can do.
Yeah.
So like,
right, your highest self.
Yeah,
the beast wants to destroy it.
Yeah, absolutely. Or it kind of, I don't know if it wants to destroy it, but I've got this horrible sense that like, that's the tasty meat. That's like the bit that it really wants to have. You know, it's quite happy to just eat tramps and stuff. That's fine. But what it really wants is to munch on this passion that's existing between this young man and woman.
Oh goodness, I really like that. Yeah, so that shining thread of gold we all have within us.
Yeah, the werewolf really fancies that.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so, well, I mean, I just thought fairly straightforward things. The werewolf just wants food and sex, but I think you're right. I mean, that's what it eats. That's part of, like, you know, that's just getting through the night, as you say.
Yeah.
But actually, when the werewolf comes to David and comes for him and comes within him, what we see, the horror, is the destruction of the higher self.
Yeah, absolutely. That whole sequence, the transformation, it builds up. The use of music throughout the film is absolutely fantastic. It's
oh my goodness.
Just these Moon songs again and again and again. Blue Moon there's like 3 different versions of Blue Moon playing now or something. And it's like Bad Moon Rising by Creedence Clearwater Revival is what's playing kind of just leading up to, you know, he's just bored and lost in the house and he has to break back in. Do you remember that bit?
Yes, he has to break back in. He's got bare feet and he can no longer... So Nurse Price... He kind of kisses her as she's leaving for work and she's like, okay, I'm going to leave you at home for the day because she's brought him home in an amazing breach of medical ethics to have sex with him, and then she leaves for work. I mean, well done, Miss Price, it's terrible behaviour. And then he's basically locked out. He can't get back into her flat. He can't get back in through the front door. Yeah. He has to go in through a window.
It's funny, isn't it? All of a sudden, you can feel that the wolf's coming on because even simple norms of behaviour, David isn't capable of them anymore.
Yeah.
He's got to, you know, he can't watch TV, he can't use a door, he can't watch TV, he can't read a book, he can't go to sleep and relax. And all of the while that this kind of disease is growing in him, Bad Moon Rising is playing, and, you know, this is one of my prejudices, but I love that track.
I love it. I'm so glad you said that. Yeah. I was going to say I'm really into Creedence Clearwater Revival. I think they're really, really good.
They are really, really good. They're an excellent movie band because I understand that they're one of those 60s bands who just got completely ripped off on their song rights.
Oh, really?
And basically during like the 80s, people just like you could put their songs in your film for very little money, basically. So there's loads of cheap action films have got rocking Creedence numbers playing over the final credits.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I always thought it was maybe a bit naff, so I didn't want to admit that I was into a bit of CCR because I know the only place I know them from also is like the teacher in Beavis and Butthead is really into them and he's like a lame hippie.
Well, and the dude from The Big Lebowski, that's his band. Yeah.
They're really good.
They're fantastic. They're an absolutely brilliant band. And they're a great, like, good time band. They're a band that you kind of love because you just know that you're having a good time when that's happening. And then the way that shifts so quickly and the kind of the way that Landis kind of manages shocks and laughs and good times and bad times is obviously what makes this film a really great film. And we're talking about monsters.
We're talking about monsters,
yeah.
We're not talking about films.
No. That scene, the way it shifts from your good time vibes into it's just the way he's screaming all the way through it and begging for it to stop, right? Like, not only are Rick Baker's special effect absolutely stunning and the way that it's been cut together, you know, shortly after this, you know, within 10 years of this film being made, special effects would go digital, and so you would never have these people being presented with the problem of like, well, we're going to film somebody transforming into a werewolf, make it happen, guys.
Yeah.
And you have to actually make it happen in the room one way or another. You're allowed to move a camera around and you're allowed to cut and stuff, but basically you've got to transform a man into a werewolf. And that sequence, it's just stunning. It's absolutely fabulously rich with the way that you can kind of see the latex but not quite, you know, the way the special effects make you feel a bit wrong, but also they're fascinating, the way they're horrific and painful but entertaining at the same time.
I love that. I really like physical effects, and I do think that we lose something when everything goes CGI, simply because there are certain beasts that it is right to represent in the physical, and werewolves are certainly one of those beasts.
It's kind of the challenge of them, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like the transformation sequence in the Wolfman, the Lon Chaney one, which kind of spawned all of the other werewolf movies. The transformation there, even though it doesn't look good now, you can tell that everybody was really excited when it came to that bit. You know, all of the people who were making the film loved that bit, and everybody really wanted to see, how are we going to transform him? How you transform him is like this. Ah!
So we go. So that's what they want. They want to do that to you.
Yeah. They want to kind of replace you, and everything that you like that's good, they're coming for it. They're going to take it away.
Yep.
Okay, this is my favourite question.
Okay, what kind of disguise should we wear? What if we were seeking to bring in a werewolf, and I wonder whether we're trying to catch one out on the moors or catch one out in ourselves, what kind of person should we be? If we're going to get infected, we need to be a man.
Yeah, we do need to be a man, we've established that. And we need to be maybe an uncertain man, I think it's fair to say. Although David is very kind of glibly confident, he's gone on holiday to the moors.
I think this is really true. I think throughout American Werewolf in London, something that they do quite cleverly and from the outset is they show men in pack-like dominance behaviours and relationships with one another.
Oh yeah, good one, yeah.
And actually, the fact that David is in a somewhat uncertain position, a way to fix that is to become the top alpha predator.
Yeah, absolutely.
In some ways, it's a solution for him.
That's really good. Yeah, I hadn't noticed actually but literally you can see the men's tails rising up in the pub when they go in there.
Yeah. You absolutely can.
And part of that, I guess, is the same thing. There's like, he's a stranger, isn't he? He's like, it's not just that you are. When he goes to the moor, it's not just that he is kind of bringing his annoying American tourismness to the moor. It's a bit like the moor hates him and is kind of like glad that he's here because he's been really looking forward to getting his hands on him.
Yeah, getting his teeth into David.
Yeah.
Yep. So the next one, so how do we know that they're there? What are the kinds of signs of presence that we're going to look out for to tell that they're in our immediate vicinity?
There's the music, there's the moon.
Yep, the
moon. All of these things seem to matter. And these were all saying to me, carnival.
Oh, okay.
Right. There's a sense. Okay, so he goes to by the time we're building up to the big night, like the kind of the final night, the previous night, David has definitely done what a bad werewolf does, and he's chomped his way through homeless people, he's chomped his way through yuppies, he's chomped his way through bankers,
Delicious.
The banker on the tube, well, we presume he's a city guy,
He's definitely like Square Mile.
That scene is great because those, they're being replaced slowly now, but those yellow tiles on the tube, they are such dramatic places. They're like, we're quite stuck in the UK for places which naturally lend themselves to looking cool in a movie, whereas America is just full of stuff that looks good in a movie. But those tiles, they're so kind of reflective, and the light they give off is so sickly, and they seem to just end so abruptly and endlessly at the same time. Everybody who's been in those tunnels, especially late at night on their own, is aware how terrifying they are.
Yeah. It's a really kind of special environment.
Really awesome sequence. But all of these things happen. So we're getting our kind of snapshot of London society. And then on the big night, the following evening, he's in Piccadilly Circus. He's in tourist land. He goes to a porno theatre. He kind of has his... Yeah.
To watch like really fun 70s porn, which seems to be like really farcical and about people popping into the wrong house the whole time.
With their pants on. And that was like especially made... Like those people have got credits in the final credits because I think they actually made like a kind of a few porn things. Yeah, good. Exactly.
Fair enough.
And so he's having a good time, and all of these kind of there's this like ribbledness which is kind of bubbling out of this. Jack, who has become like just a physical effect by this point because his physical degradation is being, or his spirit is reflecting his body's degradation as it starts to decay, and that's brilliant because every time you see him, his effects are a bit more gnarly and messed up and horrible.
That's true. I should say, like, there's an idea that we have in a lot of cultures that the soul, the state of the corpse represents the state of the soul.
Sure.
So, like, when you crack open the tomb of a saint,
they should be unspoiled.
They should be completely unspoiled, but unfortunately for Jack, he's in a very bad situation and he's decaying rapidly. Turning very green.
Well, maybe that's part of the thing then. That's why it's all happening so quickly, because this is only a few days or weeks, but already he's quite skeletal by the last time he sees him.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. This limbo place is really ferocious. Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah, he's putrefying very quickly.
Yeah, right, okay, right. Yeah, sure. And the soul... Yeah, that's the thing. I hate that idea, by the way. I hate the idea of my soul taking hundreds of years to go and just being like a really bony crap soul. Yeah. Finally, when so he undergoes his transformation in this porno theatre, the cops come thanks to the effort, the sleuthing efforts of the noble doctor who's been investigating David's case.
Absolutely fantastic. Can't remember the name of the actor. Something Woodcock, maybe?
Yeah.
Woodvine.
Yeah.
Oh.
He's got a very familiar voice to us in the UK from adverts and stuff.
Yeah.
His voice is incredibly trustworthy and doctor-like. So if somebody's trying to flog you, Anodin or some other headache remedy, then his voice would quite often be the one going, it gets absorbed by the blood very quickly. And stuff like that.
It's like, you can trust this guy.
Yeah.
He's so urbane.
Thanks to him, there's all of these bobbies around, and they're brilliant. All of these bobbies with their stupid helmets on, which unfortunately I realise we don't have anymore.
Such a shame. I miss those helmets.
Those kind of metal nipples that they have on top of their heads that do look intimidating and ridiculous at the same time, and were a total fixture of my childhood, but you just don't get them anymore. They're all there, and they're kind of, trying to literally forming this thin blue line, trying to protect us from the wildness of man's inner nature. They get totally walloped by this brilliant werewolf that bites somebody's head off. He bites the annoying detective's head off, actually, who's been very dismissive and bad cop throughout the whole thing. Didn't like him at all.
Yeah.
When he gets his comeuppance, it's great. But it's chaos. And the chaos really spreads brilliantly and rapidly through Piccadilly Circus. And there's an exuberance in the crashes, the car crashes and the screaming, running scenes. The camera is moving along with the same speed of these people as they're running and loving it. And I just kind of had this wonderful sense of no, this is actually all right. It's not just kind of death and pain. It's it's all of the shit that we do hate about the world being just bollocks. We're just having, there's a wolf in town, everyone's going crazy. It's the best night ever.
It's just completely overturned, isn't it? It is carnival.
Yeah.
I do see your point there, actually. There's something really joyful about the bit where it's just utter carnage, everyone's dying, people are going through car windscreens, it doesn't seem to take much, people are just getting bonked on the head very lightly, they're dead.
Yeah.
Blood everywhere.
And all you needed to get that across was 2 car crashes and maybe some people running and screaming. We have about 10 car crashes, loads of people running, screaming, trampling each other, things kind of getting knocked over. The camera just wants to show you this mini riot happening because it's a riot, it's great fun.
Yeah, so that's how we know the werewolf is there, everything is overturned.
Yeah, and it's kind of, you have to watch out for these signs as well. Maybe that's a better precursor of finding a werewolf than having a werewolf there first, right? Follow the sense of carnival and misrule, stick that in the shadow trap, and maybe a werewolf will come along.
I love that.
So once we've loaded up the trap... Oh no, we've got one more, sorry.
What is the next one? How to draw the
how
mist.
to draw
We
them in.
don't have to do that. We've already kind of covered that.
Covered
You
it
think? Yeah.
Okay. So, not quite our last question, but this is something which we should probably be worried about, and this is, what do we need to be wary of? What do we need to watch out for when we're being chased by werewolves or chasing werewolves ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, so this is something we've kind of touched upon. The idea that there is... The horrible thing with these beasts that I think we're going to find on the Shadow Trap is the thing you need to be scared of is yourself.
Yeah, damn.
Because as we were saying, the wolf seems to want to feed on everything that makes David a man rather than a beast.
Yeah.
And as we saw with Miss Giddens in The Innocents, it was the very kind of cornerstones of her personality that was the problem.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. And yes, of course, if David's kind of gone on this holiday to the old country to kind of try and find his roots and his sense of identity, then yeah, they're being shown to be wanting really badly.
Yeah.
They're very much under threat and partial things which he's not capable of really getting a good grip on.
Yeah, it's a scary thing, It's like when the evil comes for you, it doesn't come for your I think I've said this on Diane, but I'll say it again. It doesn't come for your career. And it doesn't come for your car, and it doesn't come for your house, It comes for your soul, it comes for your family, it comes for the things you love, it comes for the things that are right at the core of you.
Yeah. Maybe you really love your car, in which case it's probably going to mess your car up.
Yeah, I mean, if you really love your car that much, then maybe you deserve it. But
it's interesting that the countryside people still do, like, they do get it, right? They've kind of, like I said, they've established a protocol for staying out of the wolf's way. They know that as long as you make sure you stay in the pub, have a good lock-in on the moonlit night, don't walk home by yourself, stick to the road. These are all exactly what you've just been saying.
Well, I mean, this is quite interesting, isn't it? Because I noticed that with the way that the locals had developed, they had developed a whole culture of how to be wary.
Yeah.
And it's interesting when we think about the werewolf as being linked in some way to male sexual predation. The sense of a pub that you walk into, a place that you walk into, where everyone knows the score, but nobody talks about it, and people have developed strategies around it. It's quite topical this week, learning about kind of allegations of, and certainly happenings of terrible abuse within Hollywood and also Parliament in this country. That people strategise ways around it, people don't talk about it, everyone knows it's there.
Yeah, and again, it's like, you can't get away from this. It's really there, isn't it? It's like suddenly once you go, well, the behaviour of those people in that pub was weird, you kind of go, oh, not really.
Yeah.
Like, you see these same patterns. They were kind of daft enough to stick a proper, pentagram on the wall and kind of like leave it there for tourists to talk about. But yeah, these little signs of are you in the know or not? And if you're not, that's really bad. They're everywhere.
Yeah. So it's a kind of culture of wariness that builds up around it that then you see as a sign, and I think that is that's very interesting.
I agree.
So, our final question: how do we close the cage? I think this depends this week on whether we are talking about a cure or a kill. Do you feel there are any muted suggestions of the possibility of a cure in American Werewolf in London?
It doesn't look good, does it? I mean, it would have been great to kind of get the doctor and the nurse really working on this case.
Yeah.
They don't get a chance to, unfortunately.
It's really interesting that it doesn't even come up explicitly. Like, very early on, the ghost of Jack tells David that he is going to have to die in order for this thing to end. And there is never any suggestion that there's any other solution.
Yeah.
There's never any struggle, there's never any sense, maybe I could do this. I would say the only kind of hint is maybe in Nurse Price, and it kind of comes up towards the end. The idea that the love of a good woman can be a civilising influence is something that we see throughout, kind of folklore, fairy tales, movies, and it's hinted at. We never quite get there.
That's kind of the film's that's the film's kind of like emotional twist at the very end, isn't it? Is that, like, by the time their love, which again has carried us along, we are very much there with them. They are a nice couple.
Yeah.
By the time it gets to be expressed, it's already too late.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like where you go, wah, 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 unlucky guys. Maybe it would have been enough. Like, the fact of her running not to his rescue, but just to be there kind of with him when he's in trouble. That's really sweet, and yeah, there's a dangling thread of redemption there.
Yeah.
But we're certainly never allowed to see it.
No, we don't get it. Instead, we go for the explicit solution that is talked about throughout the film, which is the kill.
You have to kill the werewolf.
You have to kill the werewolf.
Nothing about silver bullets, because again, I think that, like, silver bullets wouldn't work. The silver is the moon. If you stick some moon in a werewolf, you're just making it stronger.
Yeah, it's just moon in the moon.
Yeah, I noticed that both times the wolf is shot, because the first werewolf that dies at the beginning, it's a group of men shooting it. It's like it's not enough for one person to kind of handle by themselves. It takes
a village to take down a werewolf.
Yeah, it does. You need pitchforks and burning sticks and a whole crowd of people, because you're going to have to. There's a sense of, like, well, what's worse than the kind of the unconscious rabble mentality of one man? And it's like, well, it's the rabble mentality of lots of men, obviously. It's like, this is how we're going to do it.
That's how we take him down.
But it also kind of comes back to just the title of the film and the way that the film's narrative is structured to just show you the thing that happens here. It implies that there's no further to go with this drama. This isn't a narrative arc that you're kind of used to. this is an American werewolf in London. What happens is a guy turns into a werewolf, chaos reigns, he dies. And the suggestion that it gives us is that once a werewolf is into this space, once you get your werewolf in London, whereas as we've established it's not the moor, it's not a place where you're meant to be. Death is the only ending to this, and it's totally going to happen. There's no way that a wolf can escape the eyes of the city. There's no way that the city's infrastructure can tolerate it physically or psychologically. And you know, give the Bobbies some credit. They close it down pretty quick.
They do a fantastic job. We must say, I mean, the depiction of our services, you know, the NHS seems to have been fantastic back in the...
I know, I mean...
As with the police force.
Yeah.
I mean, also, you know, still really good now, but underfunded.
Yeah, well indeed, yeah. I mean, we're not worried about the police being underfunded, that's fine. But the NHS needs some help. Quickly, we must say, is that the London that we're shown in this film, it's kind of like... It feels exactly like London. I mean, I lived in London for a few years. You grew up with London being kind of pretty much on your doorstep.
Yeah, I grew up in the commuter belt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels totally like London, and what that means is it's multicultural, it's busy, it carries all of these cliches and transcends it. The portrait that Landis gives us of London is absolutely bang on, and the way that it's all like, oh, it was a bloody ruck in Piccadilly Circus last night. The cops turn up, shot the bloody werewolf, and that was the end of the film. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, it is. That's how London would cope with it.
It kind of does work, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's a depiction of an American werewolf in London.
Yeah. You're like, hang on, was this werewolf American? You're like, bloody yeah, it was.
Oh, of course he was.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. Stands to reason, doesn't it?
Yeah, what else are they going to do?
Good. Where are we on the time? I think we've just hit now. Perfect.
Yeah, okay.
Fantastic. Did you have any other thoughts?
No, we've done the questions now, so we should just be done, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You happy to lead us out?
I'll lead us out. Okay, case closed. That's the shadow trap. We've got a werewolf, guys. We've got a ghost. We've got a werewolf.
We've bagged a couple of high-ticket monsters now.
Yeah, we have. We're gonna go a little bit more family-friendly next time, aren't we? We're gonna go after something which is a little bit more cute, but also maybe kind of gross as well. We are gonna go deep down underground, and we are gonna go in search of goblins, those creepy little so-and-sos. And the only map that we have for finding them is going to be Labyrinth.
Very excited to talk goblins next time, guys.
Yeah.
They're my absolute fave.
And there'll be a Frank Oz connection too, right? Surely he did half the puppets on Labyrinth.
Probably.
We'll find out next time, guys. Thanks ever so much for listening. If you want to talk to us, then go through the Diane channels. That's at Diane Podcast. Patreon.com/Diane Podcast if you want to watch the video of me and Rosie not turning the lights on in time. Hi. All sorts of good stuff. And as we say, this is an evolving methodology. If you've got any questions, and especially if you've got recommendations of monsters and films that you want to see us tackle, then please get in touch and let us know.
Absolutely.
And all that's left to say is, oh no, we don't do that here.
We don't do that here. What do we do?
I don't know. So that's it. That's the Shadow Trap Case 2 closed. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.